New router with real-time video thumbnails. View your router sources on a built-in LCD. Plus, create your own router size. You decide the number of video inputs and outputs. The new Avenue router from Ensemble Designs.
Hi, I'm Mike Braticelli with Broadcast Engineering Magazine and Broadcast Engineering Online. Here today with Jimmy Schaeffler, President and co-founder of the Carmel Group. Carmel Group is an industry research firm, right? You also publish a number of blogs, and they put together conferences. They actually do a panel here at NAB as well.
Correct.
We're going to talk a little bit about bandwidth and content and all kinds of issues about rights. So I want to start first of all with, we're in a digital world. Content is handled as digital files. That should make everything easy to move around, does it not?
Absolutely not. It is not true. Workflows, processes, infrastructure, all of that has made the whole shift from analog to digital very, very complex and very confusing at times. There are many issues that remain unresolved. One of the great ones being right now digital rights management and privacy and piracy and protecting and controlling all of that movement of data and files all around. It's become an awkward situation, but I think one that's very resolvable in the next decade or two. Great,
great. We see more people consuming video online on their Blackberries, on their iPads, whatnot, which means we need more bandwidth. There's, I'm assuming, a finite amount of bandwidth. Where does this new bandwidth come from?
Well, the new bandwidth is going to come from a lot of technical solutions, obviously, but it's also going to have to come from a lot of good business and a lot of good legal solutions as well. So, for example, there has got to be a lot of new innovation built around this growth. I've been working recently with a satellite company, and they have reached out to others in the industry. They have tried to understand cable, satellite, broadcast, programming, hardware, software. How are people working in the future, and how are they going to get ahead of that curve? It's all toward that management, that control, that infrastructure, that architecture that is going to build the future of telecom.
Excellent, excellent. You write a lot about a term called pay TV cross-fertilization.
Yes.
What does that term mean, and what does it mean for the industry in general?
Well, right now, this industry is converging in a lot of ways, and I hate to use that very trite and overused term, but it's very true. There are a lot of alliances right now that are going to change the way that we acquire, the way we use, the way we process data. One of those, obviously, is the AT&T T-Mobile alliance that's been announced lately. That alliance has a lot of capability to expand the ability to carry broadband, mobile, data bits around the world quickly and efficiently.
Right.
It goes towards the President's broadband initiative and what he's trying to achieve in terms of getting broadband out to nearly 100% of our people.
Right.
So that's another example of that. But the bottom line on the growth and the management of data bits is that it is going to be a great challenge. There are going to be a lot of opportunities for people, but it's certainly not a slam dunk just because we've gone from analog to digital.
Right. So are you saying basically, though, in order to expand bandwidth, you have to acquire companies?
I would say that's probably part of a lot of business models. You're either going to be the acquirer or you're going to be the acquiree.
Right.
And in the case of somebody like Charlie Ergen or the case of Mr. Stevenson at AT&T, he wants to be on the other side of that thing.
What part does technology play in that? In other words, compression and can I get extra bandwidth that way?
Yes, compression is going to continue to be an incredibly important answer to achieving more bandwidth, but it's not the only answer. There have got to be lots of other really good common sense solutions both on the technical side and on the business side. So the two constantly work hand in hand. Any good engineer is always a good businessman, and any good businessman in the technical world is always good on the technical side.
Gotcha. Great. You mentioned the President's broadband plan. I hate to put you on the spot, but I'm wondering, in your conversations with people in the industry, what's the feeling about whether broadcasters should give up some spectrum in order to make this plan happen?
Incredibly controversial, and I don't want to take a position right now because I have alliances that I think would be jeopardized in that regard. But at the same time, I think I can be fairly frank. I think there's got to be some kind of movement of spectrum from A to B. How that occurs is really the question.
Right.
There's so much change out there. There's so many business models and technical models and legal models and marketing models that are changing almost daily. And in order to get to that in a rational and reasonable way, we're going to have some kind of management and some kind of transition of spectrum from A to B.
Right.
The only real question is, do we force people to do that? Do we lead them there generously? Do we compensate them adequately? Do we not compensate them adequately?
Right, right. Okay, good. We see a lot of competition for broadcasters. You know, people can now watch things on Apple TV boxes, Roku boxes, Hulu, Netflix. There's all kinds of things where people can consume video. And I'm wondering, you know, for the local station sitting, let's say, in the middle of the country, what does the future look like for them?
Well, the future looks confusing. There's no question of that. I've had several companies approach me recently. They're small telcos, or they're small satellite providers. They're small cable providers.
Right.
And there are some big ones there as well. And what they're saying is, we don't want to be behind the curve. We don't even want to be even with the curve. We want to be ahead of the curve as this growth transitions.
Right.
And so for many, the analogy I use is we've had about 7 major transitions in the last 50 years in the world of television. Things like black and white to color, analog to digital, cable to satellite. Those were silver bullets in the sense that you knew who was affected, you knew the time frame they were going to be affected by. This is a shotgun. You don't know who's going to be affected, you don't know how long it's going to take, you don't know when it's going to happen, and everybody is impacted.
Got you. So should I be worried if I'm an owner of a station?
Yes, absolutely. You should be worried, but at the same time you should welcome the opportunity.
Great. So speaking of opportunity, where is the kind of growth in the industry do you see as far as things like bandwidth and things like you know, economics of monetizing content?
Well, growth of the industry, if I were in the business right now, I would be taking a position similar to what I see Charlie Ergen starting to do now, and that is moving toward content. Up until now, he's been very reticent to get involved in the content side of the business.
Right.
He's been a provider and he's been a hardware manufacturer. Now he's starting to cross that threshold that I never thought I'd see him cross. So what I'm getting to is I think there's an awful lot of opportunity in the growth of new content.
Great. You know, the term cord cutting has been talked about a lot. In other words, the competition among people coming from, I should say, people like Amazon, Netflix, driving people away from their traditional television providers. Is this really an issue?
It is a huge issue. It's an issue because, like we were talking about before, there's a huge change happening in the industry right now.
Right.
And that change is people are being given choice. This choice started way back in the time frame of DirecTV, 1993, 94, Eddie Hartenstein, Bill Butterworth brought in the whole idea of DirecTV, a digital choice, more quality, more programming.
Right.
This is the same thing, yet you've got it from a whole nother cadre of players. As you mentioned, you've got the Netflix, you've got the Hulu, you've got the Amazon.
Yep.
These people are using great new technology, they're using great new opportunities, and they're coming in and they're shaking up everything, and they're causing the internet service providers, they're causing the content providers, they're causing the service providers, the cable and telco and broadcast cable or broadcast TV, satellite broadcast TV operators to have to completely change and reconsider their models.
Right.
But you got to remember, there's a tremendous amount of power among those internet service providers, those content providers, and those service providers. And they're not going to let this drift away. So it's going to disrupt, but I don't think it's going to end the world for those folks. They're just going to have to find out how to better manage that competition.
Will the advent of an internet-connected TV accelerate that cord cutting?
Yes, inevitably. I don't see how it can. But what's really interesting is if you look at the existing pay TV providers today, and you look at the existing content providers, 2 of the biggest ones, Time Warner and Comcast, are also the biggest internet service providers. So they're going to have a handle in that, and they're going to have an answer into how that's controlled.
But this is all about, isn't it, the evolution of technology, and you really can't fight it, can you? You kind of have to kind of embrace it and go with it, I would say?
Both. You can fight it, but at the same time, sometimes you have no other choice but to embrace it and move around it. That's where the government and laws come in.
Right, right. This has been very informative. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Michael.